Here, a simple farmhouse in Broken Bow. A woman named Clara paused in her movements at the window. She had been kneading dough, her hands dusted with flour, when she saw the first flakes fall. Slow, lazy spirals of snow, looking harmless. Looking it, but she had lived long enough to know how fast the weather could turn on the plains. She called for her husband, Thomas, in a steady but low voice. He came and stood beside her, wiping his hands on a rag, and together they watched the horizon vanish, completely swallowed by an advancing white curtain. By evening, the wind began to roar. It was no longer a simple winter gust. It was a force, howling like something alive, something ancient. The temperature plummeted, and the snow thickened, blurring the world into a moving wall of ice and shadow. The horses strained against their tethers, the breath rising like ghosts. Thomas moved quickly, watching the shutters, checking the stove, bringing in more wood. Clara gathered blankets, swift and orderly. They knew it could last for days. Beyond the endless white, there was no sign of neighbor or traveler, only the storm, growing louder, wilder, erasing everything it touched. Dusk fell, the last light of day lost behind the storm's curtain. Inside the small farmhouse, a kerosene lamp burned, its golden light shuddered with every gust that struck the wall. The snow whispered and screamed at once, and somewhere in its depths came a lone sound, perhaps a distant shout, or the groan of ice carried by the wind. The blizzard had arrived. As night fell, the wind was no longer just a sound. It was a presence. It shook the shutter like a fist pounding the walls, mopped down the chimney, through every tiny crack in the old wooden house. Inside, the heat from the stove made the effect, yet every draft that crept through carried a bite of steel minus cold air. Thomas sat by the door, his coat over his shoulders, his eyes fixed on the flickering glow of the kerosene lamp. Each gust outside sent the flame into a frantic dance, casting shadows that crawled across the room like restless spirits. Clara sat across from him, her ending forgotten in her lap, listening to the snow scrape against the window glass. It was a strange sound, soft, insistent, like a hand brushing the pane. In the barn, the horses shifted restlessly, their hooves clicked on the wooden floor. A low whinny faintly heard through the storm's shriek. Thomas wanted to check on them, but to open that door now would be madness. The snow was already piled halfway up the threshold, and if he dared to lift the latch, the wind would tear the door from its hinges. Time passed slowly. The clock on the wall ticked, its sound almost drowned by the howling outside. Clara stirred a pot of soup on the stove. 5 toes, a few bits of salted pork, nothing more. The warmth of the broth filled the room, and for a moment, it felt like safety. She poured 2 bowls, set them on the table, and said softly, "We'll be all right. We've seen worse." But she didn't fully believe her own words. His storm was different from any they'd known. The walls groaned under its weight. He distant unsaid, something large tipping way. Perhaps the fence, perhaps part of the barn. Thomas rose swiftly, his breath misting in the cold that seeped under the door. "It'll hold," he muttered, though his voice lacked conviction. The outside world was gone. The snow had swallowed it. Every tree, every road, every marker of direction. No more horizon, no line between sky and earth, only a swirling chaos of white and shadow, moving like living smoke. As the night deepened, Clara added another log to the stove. She knelt there for a moment, watching the fire breathe and crackle. The light painted her face in golds and oranges, softening it against the dark pressing at the window. She whispered a prayer, half to God, half to the storm itself, that morning would come. Then she turned to Thomas, who was staring into the flames, his face gaunt, his eyes reflecting the fire's light. In that glow, he looked older, like a man who had fought winter all his life and met one that refused to be tamed. They did not speak again for hours. On a night like this, words felt fragile. By midnight, the sound of the blizzard changed. It no longer roared in fury, but hissed and moaned, weaving strange sounds into the dark, as if the storm itself were whispering tales into the night. The air outside pulsed with a rhythm, a deep, ceaseless breathing that made the walls tremble. Hera could not sleep. He lay under layers of quilts, her body warm but her mind uneasy. Every few minutes, she imagined footsteps outside, the crunch of boots on snow, or the faint cry of a human voice. Each time she sat up, holding her breath, listening. Fight. It was always the wind. Always that same eerie sound twisting through the chimney and under the eaves. Thomas had fallen into a shallow, uneasy sleep by the hearth, his chair tilted back, his hat pulled low over his eyes. The glow of the embers washed the room in softer rinse. Occasionally, the fire popped, sending tiny sparks flying like stars, then turning to ash. The air was thick with the scent of wood smoke, comforting and sharp, filling the lungs with the smell of pine and survival. Outside, the snow still fell thick, relentless, each flake adding weight to the earth. The roof of the barn was almost invisible, buried under white. The fence was gone entirely, the path to the well, to the road, to the nearest neighbor 3 miles away, all gone. Only the wind moved freely, like a spirit unbound, dancing and driving in the dark. Then the quietest hour, just before dawn, Clara heard a different sound, a low, distant thud. She rose carefully, wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, and went to the door. Fama stirred but did not wake. She pressed her ear against the wood and listened. For a moment nothing, and it came again, faint. Thumbed. If a rhythm, space by found. Her heart tightened. Had it someone lost in the blizzard? I traveled caught on the open plains. The thought tied her harder than any cough-hold. She wanted to open the door and look, but the memory of the roaring wind stopped her hand. Yet, she could not ignore it. She gently shook Thomas awake. He blinked, disoriented, then listened. The sound came again, muffled, uncertain, but real. He grabbed the lantern, his fingers trembling as he lit it. Step back, he whispered to her, his voice hushed by the storm. He pushed on the door, but it hardly moved. Snow had banked against it halfway up the frame, sealing them in. He forced it open a crack, and a blade of bitter cold instantly sliced through the warmth inside. It seared his skin, stung his eyes. The lantern's light reached only a few feet into the spinning void, revealing nothing but snow and movement. Then he saw, near the barn, a dark shape moved, half-minus buried, shifting slowly. He held his breath. Someone out there, he whispered. But before he could step out, the wind slammed the door shut with a bang. He stood there, gripping the handle, his heart pounding in his chest. Clara came to his side. Was it a person, she asked. Thomas hesitated. I think so, he said quietly. Maybe something caught in a drift. They stood together, listening again, but the fan was gone. The night had swallowed it completely. Morning came slowly, or what passed for morning in a world without sun. The storm still raged, though its voice had softened to a constant, ghostly sigh. The light filtering through the frosted windows was dim and blue, as if the sky itself were trapped under ice. Thomas and Clara had not slept. The strange sound from outside haunted their thoughts, echoing in memory again and again. When the dawn tried to break, Thomas made his decision. I'm going to look, he said calmly. His tone brooked no argument, though Clara's eyes pleaded with him not to. You open that door and the cold will take you before you reach the barn, she said. Wait for it to settle. He shook his head. If someone is out there waiting, the cold will take that. He dressed in silence. Warm, heavy wool coat, scarf, gloves stiff from old use. Clara wrapped an extra layer around his neck, her fingers trembling. You go only as far as the barn is visible, she whispered. If you can't see it, you turn back. Promise me. He nodded, though they both knew promises meant little in such a storm. He took up the lantern again, its flame small and stubborn, and pulled open the door. The wind hit him at once, a living wall of ice and fury. He gasped at its sharpness, feeling it invade his bones. The snow swirled around his legs as he fought forward, step by step, toward the blurred outline of the barn. Every movement was a battle. The air screamed in his ears, stealing his breath, making the lantern's flame flicker wildly as if it might die. Behind him, Clara watched through the narrow gap, her heart in her throat. He could barely see him now, just the faint glow of his light, swallowed again and again by the white. He whispered prayers to every saint she could name, clutching the cross at her neck. When Thomas reached the barn door, it was half-minus buried under a frozen roof. He kicked at it, the sound dull in the wind. After a few desperate kicks, the latch gave way, and the door cracked open. Inside, the air was warmer, heavy with the scent of high-end frightened animals. The horses whicker-read softly, "There of something on the floor." Then he saw it. Against the back wall, half-minus buried in the hay, lay a small figure still, wrapped in what looked like a tattered blanket. Thomas hurried over and knelt down. A child, maybe 10, perhaps younger, lips pale, frost on their eyelashes, skin as white as the snow outside. The child stirred slightly, a faint sound escaping chapped lips. Thomas didn't think. He lifted the child, bundled them inside his coat, and turned back toward the house. The journey back was worse. Now the wind was at his back, pushing him, spinning him in blind confusion. He could barely see where the door was, but through the blizzard, he glimpsed a light. Clara's lantern held high in the window, trembling but steady. He stumbled forward, his boots sinking deep, his lungs burning. The house rose like a ghost ship from the snow. Clara wrenched a door open, reaching for him, pulling them both inside. They collapsed on the floor, gasping, half-minus frozen, the door slamming shut behind them. For a moment, it was only the sound of the storm outside and their labored breathing. And Clara looked down at the small form in Thomas's arms, the child shivering faintly, alive. "Good Lord," she whispered. "Where'd they come from?" Thomas just shook his head, his eyes wide with shock and cold. "I don't know," he said softly, "but they're here." The child's body was cold to the core, a cold that seemed to come from within, not just from the air. Clara spread blankets near the stove, the warmest spot in the house, and Thomas laid the small form down. Their face was pale under a film of frost, lips bluish, eyelashes dusted with tiny ice crystals. The coat, if it could be called that, was just a torn wool blanket tied with rope. Fire moved quickly to pour warm water into a basin, soaked a cloth, wrung it out with shaking hands. To fasten it'll harm them. She gaped at the child's face, their neck, their hands, gently, patiently, murmuring short prayers. Thomas stoked the fire, adding more wood than he'd meant to, desperate for the heat to fill the room. Minutes passed, and the child moved. A faint groan, a flicker of motion. Their eyelids fluttered open, revealing eyes of a nearly colorless gray at the sky outside. They looked around the room in confusion, then fear, shrinking back into the blankets. Clara reached out a soothing hand. "It's all right," she said softly. "You're safe now. You're warm." The child blinked, their lips trembling. "I got lost," they whispered. The voice was thin, scratchy, barely audible. "Where'd you come from, dear?" Clara asked gently. The child hesitated, as if the question itself was hard to remember. We were in a wagon," they finally said. "My pa went to find the way. He told me to stay near the barn." A small hand twitched toward the window, toward the white world outside. "He didn't come back." Thomas and Clara exchanged a silent look, a heavy, wordless understanding. In a blizzard like that, no one wandered long and lived. Clara brushed the child's hair back, her fingers warm against the icy skin. "You did right to stay put," she said, her voice trembling with both comfort and sorrow. "We'll keep you safe now." Thomas poured a cup of the hot broth and carefully brought it to the child's lips. They sipped weakly, eyes half-minus closed, color slowly returning to their cheeks. The house was quiet, filled only with the soft breath of the fire and the distant moan of the wind. For the first time since the storm began, something in the air had shifted. It wasn't peace, not exactly. The blizzard still raged, but now there was a fragile sense of purpose, a new heartbeat pulsing within these walls. When the child fell into an exhausted sleep, Clara sat beside them, watching the snow spin outside the window. She thought of the man still out there, the father who'd walked into the storm. She whispered a prayer for him too, though she feared the wind had already taken his name. Thomas sat again by the door, the lantern beside him, staring into the flickering light. His hands still trembled from the cold and something deeper. The thought that the snow had delivered this child to them, not by chance but by some strange grace. Outside, the wind shifted direction again. The storm was not over, but inside the small house, for the first time in hours, there was warmth and there was life. The next morning, the snow had banked halfway up the windows. The light seeping through the frosted panes was soft and gray, casting everything inside in a hazy, dreamlike glow. The storm had not stopped. It had only changed its voice. The fierce howl of the night before had softened into a constant whisper, a silence that pressed against the walls, filled with the spaces between breaths. Kara was the first to stir. She moved quietly in the dim room, careful not to disturb the child sleeping curled under the covers. Her small chest now rose and fell in a slow, fragile rhythm that alone filled her heart with a cautious gladness. Thomas had fallen asleep in his chair, boots still on, hat pulled low. The lantern beside him had burned out hours before, and his face looked pale in the cold morning light. Clara added another log to the fire, watching the flames catch, their warmth slowly seeping back into the room. Outside, the wind carried faint, eerie sounds, creaks, distant snaps, maybe the muffled collapse of a roof somewhere far out on the plain. Clara thought of the neighbors she hadn't seen in weeks, the Parkers by the creek, the old Millers, wondering if their fire still burned. Thomas stirred at last, rubbing his eyes and groaning softly. Still blowing, he muttered, listening to the storm. Feels like it'll never end. Clara nodded. We'll see it through, she said, and the words were as much a promise to herself as to him. The child woke not long after, eyes slowly opening, unfocused at first, then widening as they remembered where they were. Is it morning? They asked, voice small and raspy. It is, Clara answered gently, handing him a cup of warm milk with a little sutter stirred in. You slept through the worst of it. The child took the cup in both hands, the warmth seeming to steady them. It's still snowing, he whispered, looking toward the window. Thomas followed their gaze. The world outside was nothing but white. Sky and ground had merged, the wind lifting curtains of snow that moved like smoke. Yes, he said quietly, it's still snowing. For a while they sat in silence. The fire crackled softly. The child's gentle breathing mingled with the faint sigh of the wind. And in that stillness, Clara felt something she hadn't since the storm began, a sliver of calm. She began to hum, low and slow, an old tune her mother used to sing on long nights. The melody was simple, drifting with her breath, a lullaby against the dark. The child's eyes grew hacky again, a small hand finding hers. Thomas leaned back, closing his eyes. That song, he murmured, I haven't heard it in years. Clara gave a faint smile. That always made me feel like the cold couldn't touch me. And for a brief moment, as the wind died down and the fire burned brighter, it almost felt true, as if the storm outside had paused to listen. By afternoon, the storm's rhythm shifted again. Slower, less violent, but still heavy. The air outside felt thick, smothered by the weight of endless snow. The roof groaned under the burden, wood creaking unsighing, as if the house itself were struggling to breathe. Thomas stood at the window, scraping a small, clear circle with the side of his hand. The sight that met him tightened his chest. Nothing but a blank, white world. The horizon was gone, the fence invisible. Even the barn was nearly swallowed. The blizzard had turned everything into a vast, shapeless plain of snow. Tell me to start digging a path soon, he said calmly. It doesn't let up by tomorrow. The roof could give. Clara was at the stove, stirring a thin stew. They're not going out again until the weather clears, she said firm, without looking up. You were half minus frozen last time. He didn't argue, but his eyes stayed fixed on the window as if searching for something. Maybe the outline of the wagon the child had spoken of. Maybe a sign of movement, a figure, a shadow, anything human. But there was nothing, only the restless snow. The child was awake now, sitting wrapped in a quilt near the fire, quiet but watchful. They watched Thomas with a distant, uncertain expression. "Will my pa find us?" they asked softly. Thomas turned, hesitating before he answered. "If he can, he will," he said. "And if he can't, we'll go looking for him and it's safe." The child nodded slowly, as if understanding something they were too young to understand. They looked down at the small wooden toy Clara had given them, a curved horse, rough but kind. They traced its shape with a trembling finger, whispering, "He said we were going west. Said the snow wouldn't fall that far." Farah's heart ached at the small voice. He knelt beside the child, brushing a stray lock of hair from their forehead. "Your father sounds brave," she said softly, "and he'll have done everything to keep you safe." For a while, the three of them sat together, the storm whispering outside like waves against a shore. The child fell asleep again, head resting in Clara's lap, and Thomas finally moved from the window. He knelt by the fire to add more wood, the flames flickering in his tired eyes. Then, just as the clock struck 3, a sound broke the quiet, faint, distant, but unmistakable. A dull thump, followed by a soft scraping. It came from outside, somewhere behind the wall. Clara's head snapped up. "Did you hear that?" Thomas froze, listening. It came again. Thump, scrape, thump, slow, uneven, like something moving under the snow. He stood, grabbing the lantern, his voice low but steady. "To be the wind," he said, though he didn't believe it himself. The sound came again, closer now, from the direction of the barn. Clara held her breath. "Thomas, don't," she whispered. "Not again." But he got fatty poi on his coat, the same grim determination in his eyes. "It fits him," he said. "I can't leave him out there." And he pushed open the door just enough to step into the storm. The wind met him with a slow, icy sigh, a sound swallowed by the white. Inside, Clara held the child closer, watching the flicker of the lantern's glow in the window. The only evidence that Thomas was still out there somewhere in the endless snow. The door thudded shut behind him, leaving Clara and the child alone in the shuddering quiet. Outside, Thomas was swallowed almost instantly by the storm's pale breath. The snow wasn't falling now. It was drifting, spinning in slow, ghostly spirals that blurred every edge of the world. The cold hit him with an almost physical weight, cutting through his coat, stiffening the fingers that gripped the lantern. He could see barely 10 feet ahead, yet the sound guided him. At slow, uneven thumping, then the dragging of something heavy. Each step in the snow was a fight. It was knee-inch deep now, thick and crusted, forcing him to push forward inch by inch. The lantern's light wavered, swallowed by the spinning white, but he held it high, searching for where he thought the barn should be. And he saw it. I thought he did. Just beyond the edge of his light, a dark shape moving. It was low, moving awkwardly, like a man stumbling under a burden. Thomas held his breath. "Hello," he called, his voice snatched away by the wind. "You there?" No answer. The shape kept moving, slow, aimless, as if lost. He took another step forward, the snow crunching underfoot, his heart hammering. "Thomas Whitlock," he called again, from the farmhouse. "Do you need help?" The wind moaned in answer, cold and endless, and the shape stumbled and fell into a drift. Thomas rushed forward, nearly losing his balance, dropping to his knees beside it. His lantern light spilled over the snow, revealing a man's face, pale, crusted with ice, beard stiff with frost. The man was alive, barely. His lips moved, cracked and white, words lost to the wind. Thomas leaned closer, catching only fragments. "Child, barn, lost." He recognized him now, a farmer named Elijah Harper from 2 miles north, a quiet man who sometimes traded grain at the mill. "Hold on," Thomas said, grabbing his shoulders. "You're safe now." But Elijah's eyes were wide, glassy with fear. He gripped Thomas's sleeve with surprising strength, whispering a single word clearly before his eyes rolled back. Tracks. Thomas looked around. The word echoed in his mind. Tracks. He turned the lantern toward the snow. At first, it was only wind and snowdrift. Then, faintly, patterns emerged, half-minus buried footprints leading away from where Elijah had fallen. They were not small, not a child. And they were not alone. Another set, wider, deeper, walked beside them, both disappearing toward the dark outline of the barn. The storm roared again, as if in warning. Thomas felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the cold. He looked back toward the faint glow of the house, almost invisible in the haze. He couldn't carry Elijah far in snow this deep. He couldn't leave him either. He made his choice. He dragged Elijah's limp body toward the barn, a slow haul, each movement sapping his strength. When he reached the door, he kicked it open with his heel, half-minus falling inside. The horses shifted nervously, their eyes wide and white in the lantern light. He left Elijah on the hay, gasping for breath. The wind howled outside, shaking the wooden walls, and Thomas saw them again. Those tracks, clearer now, not leading from the barn, but toward the deepest shadows where the hay was piled high. He slowly raised the lantern, its flame trembling. Something moved. The flickering lantern light danced on the wooden beams, revealing only hay tools and the restless shifting of the horses. But Thomas had seen it. In the deep hay, something shifted, a faint tremor to deliver it to be the wind. He stood perfectly still, every muscle tense, his breath fogging before him. "Woozy, there," he called, his voice low but firm. "Come on out. You're safe now." Only silence answered him. Then it came again, a soft creak, like a foot settling gently on hay. The horses snorted uneasily, stomping their hooves, their ears flicking toward the back of the barn. Thomas held the lantern higher, its warm light pushing against the dark. He took a cautious step forward. "I said, it's all right. The storm's letting up. You can come out." For a moment, he thought he saw a face, a pale blur disappearing behind a wooden post. He stepped closer, his boots creaking on the old boards. The air was thick with the smell of high-end animal sweat, mixed with a faint, metallic scent of cold. Then, from the shadows, came a small, trembling voice. "Don't be mad, please." Thomas froze. The voice was high, filled with fear. The child's voice, but not the one asleep in his house. He lowered the lantern slightly, softening his tone. "It's all right, child. Nobody's mad. Come on out." After a moment, a figure stepped into the light. A boy, maybe 8 or 9, wrapped in an oversized coat, stiff with fright. His cheeks were raw and red, eyes wide with frightened exhaustion. He clutched something to his chest, a worn woolen cap with a torn brim. Thomas's heart clenched at the sight. "Where did you come from?" he asked gently. The boy shook his head. "I don't know. We were walking, my brother said keep walking. But the wind took him." The small voice hitched, and he covered his face with a trembling hand. Thomas knelt, setting the lantern on the ground. "He made it here. That's what matters," he said softly. "You're safe now. There's a warm fire in the house. Can you walk?" The boy nodded weakly. "Is my brother there?" he whispered. Thomas hesitated. "There's another child." "Yes," he said finally. "Maybe you know each other." The boy lifted his eyes, uncertain but filled with a desperate hope. Thomas held out a hand. The small hand that met his was icy cold. He lifted the boy into his arms, the weight slight but filled with exhaustion, and turned back toward the barn door. Before stepping out, he took one last look at Elijah Harper, still unconscious in the hay. "Hold on, friend," he murmured. "I'll come back for you." When he stepped out of the barn again, the wind greeted him once more, gentler now, but still relentless. He fought his way back to the house, toward the faint glow of Clara waiting in the window. When she saw him through the frosty glass, her hands flew to her mouth. Another child. Thomas pushed the door open, warmth flooding over them both. For it was fully closed. Clara was there, wrapping blankets around the boy. "Merciful heaven," she whispered, her voice shaking. How many more are out there? Thomas looked down at the two children, one sleeping, the other now shivering in her arms, and slowly shook his head. We can't take them all if the snow doesn't stop, he said. Outside, the wind sighed like a tired beast against the house. Inside, two small lives nestled into warmth and hope, while a man still lay alone in the frozen dark. The fire crackled softly, warmth seeping into every corner of the small farmhouse as the children nestled together under blankets. Clara moved carefully, her hand brushing over their child cheeks, smoothing hair, whispering words of comfort. The boy from the barn clung to the blankets, his eyes wide as if afraid to breathe too deep, lest he lose the warmth. Thomas set the lantern on the table, its golden light mingling with the orange-red glow of the hearth. He sat down slowly, letting out a deep breath, feeling the ache of muscle stiff from cold and exertion. He had dragged, tarried, guided. And yet, there was still Elijah Harper waiting, unconscious in the barn while the blizzard raged dying. Clara began to prepare a simple meal, a bit of broth and soft bread, something to restore the children. The smell of cooking filled the room, comforting and grain. The boy from the barn sipped at the broth, though he still trembled despite the heat. And the other, younger child who had slept fitfully began to stir, blinking at the dim light. Thomas watched them eat, listening to the soft sounds, the little sips, the faint crackle of the fire, the low groan of the house under the weight of snow. And in that quiet, he felt a fragile hope. If they could survive this night, maybe, just maybe others could too. Clara, he said quietly, we need to get Elijah inside, but the storm hasn't broken enough to bring him far. We'll have to wait for it to ease. He nodded, her face etched with worry. I'll keep the fire going. The children fed. He'll bring him in when you can go. The boy from the barn leaned against Clara, finally relaxing enough to close his eyes, the exhaustion of the night finally catching up to him. Even the younger, once frightened child began to doze again, soothed by the warmth and the soft sound of Clara humming a quiet tune. Thomas looked out the window. The storm still raged, but there was a faint sign of movement in the snow. The wind's howl died down in brief intervals, almost imperceptibly, and the flakes drifted in slower arcs. He felt a cautious comfort. Maybe the time to act was coming. But as he sat there watching the children sleep, Thomas allowed himself the small, rare thought of hope that in the storm, on this frozen waste, they had found each other, and that sometimes, even the coldest nights could be softened by warmth and human care. The wind whispered outside, relentless, yet softened, as if acknowledging their courage. Inside the farmhouse, girding its quiet miracle, life persisted against the vast white void beyond the walls. Night fell slowly, the pale blue sky fading to gray, light filtering through the frosted windows like a memory of distant sun. Inside the farmhouse, the warmth of the stove had settled into a gentle rhythm, wrapping around the children like a protective mist. Clara moved softly among them, checking blankets, smoothing hair, humming a low, steady tune. Thomas sat by the window, the lantern on the sill, watching the endless swirl of snow outside. The world beyond the glass had no edges, no landmarks, only the constant movement of white, as if it stretched on forever. His fingers traced the icy pane, feeling the cold condensation that had formed during the night. For a moment, he allowed himself to imagine the plains beyond the storm, the quiet fields, the bare trees, the weak sun glinting on frost. But the blizzard was here, relentless and unyielding. The children, now settled under warm quilts, murmured softly in their sleep. Their small breaths rose and fell in slow, even rhythms, a sight that filled Clara with both hope and dread. So fragile, so small, against the vast frozen world. He gently placed a hand on the sleeping boy from the barn. You're safe now, she whispered. Nothing can harm you here. Thomas continued to gaze out the window. In the distance, through the moving curtain of snow, he thought he saw movement, a fleeting shadow, maybe a waving branch, or perhaps something else. His pulse quickened, but he didn't call out. The slightest sound might break the fragile quiet in the room, the delicate peace they had found. Time passed slowly. The wind lessened but did not stop, carrying a constant sigh of ice across the plains. The house groaned under the weight of snow, boards creaking like tired old bones. Yet, inside, There was warmth in the soft, steady presence of life. Clara leaned against the back of Thomas's chair. "All we can do is wait," she said calmly. "We've done what we can for now. The storm will break eventually." He nodded, still watching, still alert. Hey. When it does, he murmured, "I'll go for Elijah, and for anyone else we can find." And outside, the blizzard murmured faintly, then softened into a gentle hiss, as if acknowledging their courage and patience. The children slept on, and Thomas allowed himself to hope that morning would bring more than just survival. Maybe a step toward rescue, toward light, toward the thawing of the frozen world around them. Morning came as a whisper, soft and tentative. The storm had not fully passed, but its fury had diminished, leaving a silence that pressed gently against the farmhouse. Outside, the snow glittered in the weak gray light, each flake frothing in its drift, still and quiet after the night's find. Clara was the first to stir. He rose quietly to tend the stove. The fire had burned low, the embers glowing like coals in the dim light. He added more wood, and warmth slowly filled the room, chasing away the chill that had seeped into every corner. The children stirred in their sleep, stretching, murmuring softly, still wrapped in blankets and each other's company. Thomas was already awake, sitting by the window with the lantern in hand. His eyes scanned the endless white of the plains, searching for any sign of life, any movement, anything to break the uniform gray. He thought of Elijah Harper in the barn, the boy from the barn, the youngest child now waking in Clara's lap. Each life was a fragile ember in this vast frozen wilderness. Clara brought the children to the small table, handing them broth and slices of bread. The youngest ate slowly, eyes wide, listening to the gentle wind outside. The boy from the barn sipped cautiously, cupping the mug in both hands for warmth, still trembling. Yet each bite, each sip, brought color back to their cheeks, a small proof that the storm had not taken them. Thomas took a deep breath, letting the warmth seep into his bones. "We'll need to start moving soon," he said quietly, almost to himself. "The storm is easing, but the snow is deep. We must plan how to reach the neighbors, check the roads, bring a latch in." Clara nodded, though the thought of stepping out into that white world again tightened her stomach. "We need rest first, to regain our strength. The children can't walk, and we can't go far." Outside, the plains seemed quieter. The wind had died to a low sigh. The snow lay in high drifts, glimmering faintly under the dull morning light. The farmhouse stood like a lone beacon, a small island of warmth and life in a sea of white ice. Thomas set the lantern on the table, watching the children's gentle movements. "One step at a time," he said calmly, more to himself than anyone. "We've survived the worst. Now we just need to hold on. Wait for the world to come back to us." The children nestled closer under the blankets, and the fire crackled softly. Ooh. Outside, the storm lost its voice, leaving only silence and snow. And in that silence, the farmhouse guarded a fragile, golden peace. Later that morning, after the children had rested and eaten their simple breakfast, Thomas knew he could wait no longer. The wind had died down enough to risk the journey to the barn, though each step through the deep, crusted snow would be a struggle. He bundled up, wrapped a scarf tightly around his neck, and took up the lantern once more. Clara helped him bundle the boy from the barn in extra blankets. "Be careful," she whispered, her hand on his shoulder. "The snow hides everything. One wrong step." Thomas nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "I'll be back soon," he said softly. "Stay inside with the children." The journey to the barn was slow and treacherous. The snow came up to his knees. Each movement was a fight against the resistance of the thick, frozen drifts. The wind still whispered and moaned, the air carrying a faint scent of high-end frost. He followed the path he had cleared the night before, holding the lantern high, every sense alert to the moving white outside. When he reached the barn, he saw Elijah Harper stirring slightly in the hay. The man's face was pale, lips bluish, but there was movement, a flicker of eyelids, a faint groan. Thomas knelt beside him, brushing snow from his coat. "We've come for you," he said gently. "Can you stand?" Elijah tried, shaking with cold and exhaustion. His legs trembled, knees buckling beneath him, but he nodded weakly. Thomas slipped an arm under his shoulders, steadying him, then carefully helped him to his feet. The barn was filled with the scent of high-end warmth, mixed with the faint smell of sweatened animal, comforting in its own way. The horses shifted nervously, sensing the movement, but Thomas soothed them with calm words. Each step toward the door was slow and cautious. The snow outside was still deep, the wind still biting, but the softer light of morning gave him courage. He stepped out into the white world once more, Elijah leaning on him for support, the lantern casting a small circle of light into the swirling snow. Step by step, Thomas guided him toward the farmhouse. Each movement was exhausting, yet there was a strange rhythm to it. One foot forward, the other following, steady, careful, moving toward warmth and safety. And they reached the door. Clara was waiting, wrapped in a heavy quilt, arms outstretched. Thomas gently helped Elijah inside, and the warmth of the house washed over them like a wave. The fire burned brighter, filling the room with lightened light. Elijah collapsed into a chair, shivering, exhausted, but alive. Aaron Thomas moved quickly, stripping off his wet, frozen clothes, wrapping him in blankets, handing him hot broth. The children watched quietly, eyes wide with wonder at this man who had survived the storm, another fragile ember of life reclaimed from the frozen plains. Outside, the wind died to a constant sigh, and the farmhouse seemed to breathe, guarding within its walls the fragile, unyielding pulse of warmth, safety, and human tenacity. With Elijah finally inside, the farmhouse felt fuller, yet the weight of the storm still pressed against its walls. Clara moved from stove to table, tending to the children, preparing a more substantial meal. The smell of stew and baked bread filled the room, mingling with the scent of wood smoke and the faint odor of hay that still clung to Elijah's coat. Thomas stood at the window, watching the piled snow. The plains beyond were a uniform white, a frozen sea that seemed to stretch on forever. The wind had slowed, softened to a sigh that brushed the wooden walls rather than shaking them. He felt a thread of relief, though exhaustion gnawed at him like a constant ache. The children, now wrapped in layers of blankets, slowly shifted from curiosity to comfort. The youngest clutched a tattered cloth doll, her lids heavy. The boy from the barn leaned against Clara, quietly tracing the edge of a quilt. Their presence filled the farmhouse with life, a fragile island against the endless whiteout sky. Elijah rested in a chair by the fire, sipping the broth Clara had prepared, each small sip bringing color back to his cheeks. He looked around the room, his eyes filled with gratitude and disbelief. "I thought I'd never make it," he whispered. Thomas placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're safe now," he said simply. "That's what matters." Clara set the last plate of food on the table and sat down beside the children. "We stay here for now," she said, "and the storm fully passes. Then we visit the neighbors, check the roads, help anyone who might need it." The fire crackled softly, the flames casting a gentle glow about the room. Outside, the blizzard had faded to a whisper, the snow drifting in quiet arcs, shimmering faintly in the dull light. Inside, the farmhouse was filled with warmth, the soft murmurs of the children, and the low, steady breathing of those who had survived the night. Thomas leaned back, finally allowing himself to rest. He looked around at the faces illuminated by the firelight glare, the children, Elijah, and felt the fragile pulse of hope. They had endured the storm, faced the frozen night, and had not broken. In that quiet little house, life had returned, and though the plains outside remained a sea of white, inside they had found warmth, safety, and each other. The afternoon stretched on slowly. Outside, the storm softened into a gentle, spinning whisper. The farmhouse seemed to breathe with its inhabitants, the warmth of the stove filling every corner, softening the chill that had clung to them for so long. Clara moved among the children, brushing stray locks of hair from their faces, adjusting blankets, murmuring gentle comforts. The youngest child began to stir, blinking sleepily at the dim light. He yawned, curling tighter under the quilt, small fingers clutching the soft fabric. Clara smiled, gently holding them. "You're safe now," she whispered. "The snow can't touch you here." Thomas sat by the window, the lantern beside him, his eyes tracing the patterns of white moving outside. Though the wind had died down, the snow had banked up to half the windows. The landscape was still alien, a frozen sea without edges or landmarks, but the softer light of afternoon brought a sense of space, a faint hope of clarity. Elijah, now steadier, leaned back in his chair. "Can't believe I made it," he murmured, his voice. I thought that was the end." "You did well," Thomas said quietly. "You kept moving. That's what matters." The boy from the barn stirred, finally able to relax after hours of tension. He traced the edge of the quilt with small, careful motions, eyes wide but calmer now. "Will we be warm all night?" he asked softly. Clara nodded. "We promise. The fire will keep burning, and we'll all stay together." For a long while, the room was quiet, filled only with the soft crackle of the fire, the children's gentle breathing, and the faint whisper of the wind outside. It was a fragile, peaceful interlude, a moment suspended between survival and uncertainty. Thomas allowed himself to take a deep breath, letting the calm seep into his tired muscles. The world outside was still white and vast, but inside the farmhouse, there was life, warmth, and the comforting pulse of human presence. As the afternoon waned, the fire burned lower, casting long golden shadows about the room. The children dozed again, small bodies curled under layers of blankets. Clara moved softly, straightening bedding, checking the fire, her movements slow and deliberate, as if savoring each moment of peace. Thomas sat by the window, the lantern casting a soft glow beside him. He traced the shapes in the snow outside. Each drift and hummock was a reminder of the night's relentless fury. His thoughts drifted to winters past, storms endured, hardships weathered, countless nights spent watching the snow fall endlessly on the plains. Each memory carried a mix of struggle and resilience, a quiet determination in the face of hardship. Elijah sat quietly by the fire, wrapped in a blanket, staring into the flames. "I remember a storm like this," he said softly. "Years ago when I was young. I thought we'd never see the sun again. But we did. We always do." Thomas nodded, his eyes still fixed on the vastness beyond the farmhouse. "Storms test you," he said. "They show you what you're made of. And tonight we all learn it." Clara glanced at the children, their breaths even, small bodies relaxed in the warmth. "We learn it together," she said. "And we'll keep learning step by step, hour by hour." Outside, the wind sighed softly, the snow spinning in gentle arcs, shimmering like crystals in the dull light. The farmhouse creaked and settled under the weight of drifts, but within its walls warmth, shelter, and the quiet assurance of life were guarded. Thomas took a deep breath, feeling the weight of exhaustion and relief intertwined. The storm had left its mark, but they had survived. In this quiet little room, they had found a fragile peace, a moment to rest and gather strength for whatever lay ahead. As evening approached, the light outside softened to a near minus silver gray. The storm had mostly passed, leaving only slow minus drifting snow. The wind, now a gentle sigh, pressed softly against the farmhouse walls. Thomas stood at the window, the lantern in hand, watching the endless white of the plains. And each snow ridge, each shifting shadow drew his attention. Each movement might mean another life, another soul lost in the storm. Clara moved softly among the children, brushing hair from their faces, smoothing blankets. The boy from the barn stirred, waking to the comfort of warmth and the reassurance of food and care. "Will it snow again?" he asked in a small, trembling voice. Thomas shook his head slowly. "Not like before," he said. "The worst is over. The storm has spent its rage." Just as he spoke, a flick of movement outside the window caught his eye. At first, he thought it a trick of the light, a shadow moving in the drifting snow. Then he saw it again, a faint, dark shape moving slowly across the plains, not like the wind, but purposeful, deliberate. Clara noticed his sudden stillness. "What is it?" she whispered, following his gaze. "I don't know," Thomas murmured. "Could be someone out there, someone needing help." Elijah, now stronger from the hot broth, leaned closer. "Can't leave them," he said, his voice but firm. Thomas nodded. "We wait a little longer. Let the snow settle, then we go." For long minutes, the farmhouse was quiet, filled only with the soft crackle of the fire and the children's gentle breathing. Outside, the snowdrift had shimmered, and the mysterious shape remained, moving steadily through the endless white. Clara moved closer to Thomas, her voice almost inaudible. "Do you think it's safe?" He met her eyes, weary but determined. "It's safe enough to try," he said. "We've come this far. We can't ignore anyone." The shape outside paused, as if sensing their attention, then continued, slowly moving toward the faint glow of the farmhouse. Night was approaching, though in the snow-covered world, it was hard to tell dark from great twilight. Thomas, bundled tight, went to the door. Clara handed him a thick blanket, which he draped over his shoulders, and the boy from the barn briefly gripped his arm, hesitant but trusting. Outside, the snow crunched under his boots, each step sinking deep into the knee-high drifts. The wind had lessened, but the cold was still biting, cutting through every layer, stinging his cheeks, numbing his fingers even through gloves. He had the lantern high, its flame flickering in the spinning snow, casting wan, dancing shadows on the drift. The faint shape he had seen earlier moved slowly across the plains, sometimes disappearing into the undulating snow, reappearing moments later. Thomas adjusted his course to follow, careful not to lose its trail. "Every few steps," the boy from the barn whispered. "Do you think they're hurt?" Thomas kept his voice calm. "Maybe, but what happened? That's what matters." As they trudged forward, the light of the farmhouse faded behind them, the golden glow shooting in the distance. The snowfield stretched endlessly in every direction, only the faintest blur of earlier travelers' tracks or the shape of a buried fence. The cold felt alive, pressing against their chests, whispering through their layers. Yet the need to reach that unknown figure drove them onward. Finally, after what felt like hours but was only a short distance, Thomas saw the shape clearly. A man, young, exhausted, frozen, face down in a shallow drift. He bore the unmistakable signs of frostbite: pale skin, purplish lips, clothing stiff with ice. Thomas rushed to his side, kneeling, brushing snow from the man's coat. The young man groaned, stirred slightly, opened his eyes to reveal confusion and fear. "I can't move," he whispered, his voice hoarse from cold. "And," Thomas said gently, helping him up. "I've got you. We're taking you inside. You'll be warm soon." With careful, firm movements, Thomas helped the man to his feet, adjusting the blanket wrapped around him. The boy from the barn followed closely, offering a small, steady hand to help guide and balance, and they turned back toward the farmhouse. Ooh. Each step was a slow battle through the thick snow. The farmhouse light flickered to the falling snow, steady and inviting, a beacon of warmth in the frozen sea around them. When they reached the farmhouse, Thomas felt a wave of relief. The wind outside had softened to a gentle sigh, but the snow still banked high against the door. Clara was there at once, reaching out, pulling the young man inside with careful hands. The boy from the barn followed, brushing snow from his sleeves as he stepped in. Inside, the warmth of the stove hit them like sunlight. The fire crackled, golden light reflecting off the walls, illuminating the faces of the children who had woken, blinking at the newcomers. Farah guided the man to a chair by the fire. His teeth chattered uncontrollably, his hands stiff with cold. Thomas knelt beside him, brushing icy hair from his forehead. "You're safe now," he whispered. "Drink some broth. Warm yourself." Farah poured a cup of broth, steam rising into the air, and helped him sip slowly. His cheeks began to regain color. The shivering lessened enough for him to lean back into the blankets Clara had wrapped around him. The children watched silently, curious and quiet, sensing the fragility of life reclaimed from the frozen plains. The farmhouse seemed to breathe with them. Each crackle of the fire, each lessening gust outside, was a reminder that they were sheltered, warmed, and together. Thomas glanced at the boy from the barn, who had settled at last into a chair by the fire, leaning into the warmth, letting exhaustion wash over him. Elijah Harper, now stronger, offered quiet help, adjusting blankets, gently tending the fire to keep the warmth. Even inside, the small farmhouse felt fuller, yet each presence brought comfort, a shared sense of survival and resilience. Outside, the blizzard had softened to a gentle spin, snow drifting silently, each flake shimmering in the dim twilight. Inside, guarding life, warmth, and hope, a fragile, unbroken refuge against the harsh frozen world beyond the walls. As the night deepened, the farmhouse glowed softly in the dim snow-minus world. The wind had died to a whisper, blowing fine powder across the plains, the frozen landscape stretching endlessly in soft shades of gray and white. Inside, the warmth of the fire clung to every surface. The light of the flames, casting golden tones about the room, illuminated the quiet, sleeping forms of the children. Clarice sat beside the youngest child, brushing hair from their face, whispering something, her words rhythmic and comforting against the chill that lingered at the edges of the room. The boy from the barn had curled up by the fire, finally still, the storm and the day's exhaustion having claimed him into sleep. Thomas, the lantern beside him, gazed out the window. The plains were alien, drifts, high fences buried, every familiar landmark softened under layers of snow. Yet, in the stillness, he could see traces of resilience, blurred footprints, faint shadows, the weak glint of sun on ice in the distance, each mark a proof that life continued even here, after nature's harshest test. Elijah, now sitting quietly by the fire, sipped slowly from a warm cup, the heat soothing his frozen muscles. "It's strange," he murmured, his voice low. "The storm is over, but its memory is everywhere. I can feel it in the silence, in the snow, in the weight of the world outside." Thomas nodded. "Yes," he said softly, "but look here inside. We survived. We held on, and that's more than anything out there." The farmhouse seemed to exhale quietly with its inhabitants, creaking gently under the weight of snow, warmth radiating from the hearth, the rhythm of guarded life pulsing softly. Outside, the remnants of the storm lay often silent, but inside, hope, resilience, and care filled every corner, a reminder that even after the fiercest blizzards, life could continue, fragile, yet unbroken. The next morning dawned gray and still. The sun, low on the horizon, cast a soft silver light over the endless snow, illuminating gentle sparkles on the drifts. The wind had died completely, leaving the plains quiet and deceptively calm. Thomas knew it was time to begin exploring beyond the immediate safety of the farmhouse, to see the full impact of the storm and check on the neighbors. Farah helped the children into layers of clothing, wrapping scarves around small hands and faces. The boy from the barn watched quietly, ready to step outside for the first time since the blizzard, both excited and nervous. The youngest child clutched a small cloth doll, eyes wide at the shining white world beyond the door. Thomas and Elijah went out first, stepping cautiously into the deep snow. Each foot sank in, the drifts soft and heavy underfoot, but the path they had cleared the day before provided guidance through the frozen landscape. The cold was biting, exposed skin feeling sharp and raw, each breath forming small clouds that vanished quickly in the still air. As they moved farther from the farmhouse, faint signs of life began to appear. Footprints, broken branches, the barely visible tops of fences. Each clue brought reassurance that they were not alone, that other lives had withstood the storm's harsh grip. Thomas paused, turning to Elijah. "We need to go slowly," he said. "The snow is deep and unpredictable. One misstep could be dangerous." Elijah nodded, following closely. The warmth of the farmhouse behind them, a steady reminder of safety and shelter. Step by step, careful and deliberate, they moved across the shining plains, aware of the vastness surrounding them, yet filled with the quiet resolve to restore connection and life beyond the farmhouse walls. After nearly an hour of careful movement to the drifts, Thomas spotted a faint movement near a partially buried fence. He signaled to Elijah, who paused beside him, eyes scanning the snow-covered plains. There, huddled in the lee of a small copse of trees, was a figure, a man hunched against the cold, coat stiff with frost, hands pressed tightly to his chest. Thomas hurried forward, calling gently, "It's all right. We're here to help." The man looked up, eyes wide with exhaustion and disbelief. His lips were bluish, each breath forming a faint, trembling cloud. I thought no one would come," he whispered, his voice hoarse from cold. Elijah reached out to steady him, and Thomas draped a spare blanket over his shoulders. "You're safe now," Thomas said softly. "We're taking you to the farmhouse. Warmth, food, whatever you need." The journey back was slow and careful. Each step sank deep into the snow, Thomas supporting the man with one arm, Elijah steadying him from the other side. The wind had softened to a gentle whisper, but the cold still pressed insistently, urging them to move deliberately, cautiously, conserving every ounce of energy to keep the man upright and moving forward. The light of the farmhouse grew steadily brighter in the distance, a golden beacon in the frozen wilderness. The children's faces, briefly visible at the window, mirrored hope and relief. Each step toward warmth was a reclamation of life from the storm's icy grasp, a tangible proof that survival and care could bridge the harshest storms. Once inside the farmhouse, the rescued neighbor collapsed into a chair by the fire, shivering despite the thick blankets Clara wrapped around him. The warmth was immediate, radiating into frozen limbs and stiff muscles. The children stirred, booting sleepily at the newcomer, the boy from the barn peering from behind a quilt, curious and cautious. Thomas knelt beside the man, brushing snow from his shoulders, checking his hands and face for frostbite. "You're safe now," he said gently. "Just rest. Let the warmth reach you first." Elijah stirred nearby, handing a cup of hot broth. The man took it slowly, steam rising into the air, carrying the plain scent of nourishment and comfort. Each sip brought more color to his pale cheeks, and as the steady heat of the fire did its work, his shivering eased. Clara moved among the children, ensuring they stayed warm and calm. The youngest child clung to their cloth doll, watching the gathering of so many in one room with wide eyes. But the quiet order and gentle movements of the adults reassured them. Outside, the plains were calm, the drifts shimmering in the soft daylight filtering through the frosted windows. Inside, life continued, steady, calm, and warm. Each presence in the farmhouse reinforced the fragile but enduring sense of hope. Survival had been hard -1, but now, gathered in the golden glow of the hearth, they could feel the first real security since the blizzard began. The farmhouse hummed with quiet life, gentle breaths, shifting blankets, and the soft crackle of the fire, a refuge against the frozen world beyond the walls. The afternoon settled into a slow, comforting rhythm. The rescued neighbor and Elijah rested by the fire, sipping hot broth, letting the heat seep into their cold bodies. Clara moved among the children, brushing stray locks of hair from their faces, adjusting blankets, the soft rustle of fabric the only sound besides the gentle crackle of the fire. Thomas went to the window, looking out over the plains. The snow stretched endlessly, shimmering softly in the gentle daylight. Fences poked through the drifts, half buried, treetops bent under the weight of ice. The roof was silent, almost serene, but beneath its beauty lay the harsh memory of the storm's fury. Elijah stirred, now steadier, glancing at Thomas. "We made it through," he said calmly, a faint smile touching his lips. "All of us," Thomas nodded, allowing himself to feel the truth of the words. "Yes," he replied. "Now we rest." Tomorrow we see what the storm left behind. The children slept peacefully, their small breaths rising and falling gently and rhythmically. The boy from the barn settled at last by the fire, exhaling a soft sigh as he allowed himself to fully relax. Even the youngest, clutching the cloth doll, slept again, comforted by the warmth and the shared presence of the survivors. The farmhouse was a refuge. Every corner guarded warmth, life, and quiet reassurance. The memory of the storm lingered only as shadows in their minds, softened by the tangible proof of survival. Here, for the first time in days, they could simply breathe, rest, and gather strength for whatever lay ahead. And night fell. The farmhouse was enveloped in the calm golden glow of the fire. The children slept deeply, small bodies curled under thick blankets, while Clara moved softly among them, checking blankets, whispering words of comfort. The boy from the barn had settled by the hearth, the day's exhaustion giving way to peaceful stillness. Thomas sat by the window, the lantern beside him, watching the endless snow-covered plains stretch away. The world outside was transformed, drifts high, fences buried, every surface glimmering with frost. It was a silent, frozen landscape, but strangely beautiful in the soft light of dusk. Elijah leaned back in his chair, wrapped in a blanket, sipping slowly from a warm cup. "Hard to believe we're still here," he murmured. "That storm. It was so relentless." Thomas nodded, his eyes fixed on the vastness beyond the farmhouse. "We withstood it," he said calmly. "Now we have warmth, food, and each other. That's enough for tonight." The rescued neighbors settled by the fire, blankets wrapped tightly, breathing steady and even. The farmhouse was filled with the quiet vitality of life. Soft murmurs, the crackle of the fire, the gentle rhythm of survival. The snow outside drifted silently in the dim light, but inside, warmth and hope persisted. Thomas allowed himself a moment of reflection, closing his eyes briefly, the peace of the night washing over him. The storm had left its mark, but the farmhouse stood firm, guarding a refuge of safety, care, and resilience against the frozen world outside. The first light of morning filtered softly through the frosted windows, casting a pale glow inside the farmhouse. Outside, the snow shimmered like scattered crystals, silent and undisturbed since the blizzard's passing. Inside, warmth and quiet filled the air, the fire crackling softly, the children slowly stirring, blinking sleep from their eyes. Thomas knew they needed to check on more distant farms, cabins, anyone who might still be trapped or in need of food and blankets. Elijah nodded. "The snow has settled. The path we cleared yesterday will help. But we must go slowly," he replied. "Some parts of the plains are still treacherous." Clara moved among the children, adjusting blankets, offering gentle reassurances. The boy from the barn stirred, sitting up carefully, eyes wide as he watched the adults prepare to venture again into the frozen landscape. The young woman they had rescued stirred nearby, sipping hot broth, her strength slowly returning. She looked around the small group gathered in the farmhouse, her eyes holding a quiet gratitude. Thomas looked out beyond the endless snow. The storm had left its mark, shaping the world into a frozen wilderness. Yet inside, life persisted. Every person in the farmhouse was a reminder of resilience, careful planning, and quiet courage that had sustained them through the blizzard. Moved cautiously, Thomas finally said, turning from the window, step by step, helping who we can reach. "We'll take nothing for granted." The farmhouse, warm and alive, hummed softly with a quiet sense of purpose. Outside, the snow stretched endlessly, shimmering in the morning light. But inside, determination and hope guided every motion, every decision, and every careful step forward. Bundled tight against the lingering cold, Thomas, Elijah, and the rescued neighbors stepped outside once more, leaving the warm glow of the farmhouse behind. The snow stretched endlessly, shimmering softly in the pale morning light, the air crisp, stinging their cheeks. Each breath formed a small cloud that vanished quickly into the frozen wilderness. The path they had cleared the day before provided guidance. But in many places, the drifts were still deep, coming up to their boots, requiring careful, deliberate steps. Every movement demanded attention, each step measured to avoid pitfalls hidden beneath the glittering surface. Thomas led the way, holding the lantern high, by scanning the plains for signs of life. "We need to watch for footprints or tracks," he said softly. "Anyone who survived the storm might be trying to seek help." Elijah followed closely, steady and alert. "I see something over there," he said, pointing to a blurred shape in the snow. A small group of figures appeared in the distance, huddled together, likely trapped neighbors or travelers. Thomas nodded. We approached slowly, he said. They'll need warmth and reassurance as much as food or shelter. Step by step, careful and deliberate, they moved. Across the shining wilderness, the farmhouse fading in the background, the promise of aiding others stretching ahead. The snow whispered softly underfoot, the world quiet except for the crunch of boots and the occasional call of a neighbor as they drew near. Every moment on the frozen plain was deliberate, cautious, filled with quiet resolve, though the storm held harsh memories, like fragile, cautious. As they drew closer, the small group of figures resolved into a family huddled together, their coats stiff with frost, faces pale, hoods bluish from cold. The Terrans' eyes widened as they saw Thomas, Elijah, and the others approaching, a mix of relief and disbelief in their gaze. Their children clung to them, shivering and afraid, the memory of the blizzard still fresh in their expressions. Thomas called out gently, his voice calm and steady. It's all right. We're here to help. You're safe now. The father's shoulders sagged slightly, releasing tension he had held, and the mother pulled the children closer. He thought no one would come, she whispered, her voice trembling. We weren't wrapped. Elijah stepped forward, offering a warm blanket. You're safe now, he said softly. We'll take you to warmth, food, and rest. Thomas and Elijah carefully guided the family, supporting them through the deep snow. Each step required balance and vigilance, for the drifts concealed uneven ground. The children's small hands gripped theirs, trusting completely in the adults who had come to save them. As they neared, the light of the farmhouse grew brighter, a golden beacon in the vast white landscape. Each careful step towards safety was a small victory over the lingering power of the storm, a quiet triumph of human resilience and care. When they reached the farmhouse, the family shivering but safe, they stepped slowly and carefully over the threshold, into the warmth. Inside, the glow of the fire enveloped them. Each was wrapped tightly in blankets, the scent of breath and hay creating a refuge against the frozen world outside. Inside the farmhouse, warmth embraced the newly rescued family. The fire crackled steadily, golden light reflecting off the walls and the blankets Clara carefully adjusted for the children. The adults slumped into chairs by the fire, shivering, but slowly relaxing as heat seeped into their frozen limbs. Thomas knelt beside the father, brushing snow from his coat, checking his hands for frostbite. You're safe now, he said gently. Just rest. Let the warmth reach you first. Elijah handed each family member hot broth, watching as color gradually returned to their cheeks and the shivering subsided. The children clung to the blankets, eyes wide, absorbing the comforting atmosphere of the farmhouse. The youngest clutched a cloth doll, finding security in the familiar presence, amid the unfamiliar chaos of the past days. Clara moved among the group, whispering gentle words, smoothing hair. Her gentle rhythm of care was a balm to frayed nerves and frozen bodies. Even the boy from the barn, sitting by the fire, felt the safety of the space, his small hands pressed together as he watched the newcomers settle. Outside, the plains remained still, the vast expanse of snow shimmering faintly in the late morning light. Inside, life pulsed quietly, the children's gentle breaths, low conversations, and the steady crackle of the fire combined, creating a fragile sanctuary. The storm had left its mark, but here, within these walls, warmth, care, and hope endured, a refuge against the harshness of the frozen world outside. As the rescued family grew comfortable by the fire, a quiet energy filled the farmhouse. The children, still wrapped in blankets, peered curiously at the newcomers, while Thomas and Elijah moved among the adults, helping with coats, adjusting blankets, offering hot broth. Father cleared his throat, his voice still, hoarse from cold, and began to tell their ordeal. The storm caught us trapped in our own farmhouse, he said softly. The snow came so fast, We barely had time to secure the animals and gather blankets. We thought no one would find us. The mother nodded, pulling her shawl tighter. "The felt endless," she murmured. We huddled together, waiting, praying for the storm to pass. Thomas listened quietly, his eyes scanning the children, then looking out at the snow, reflecting on the fragile endurance of human life in such conditions. "The storm spared almost no one," he said gently, "but you made it through, and now you're safe." Elijah added, "The world outside is harsh, yes, but inside here, warmth and care can still thrive. That's why we keep moving, step by step to help others." Clara gave a soft smile, brushing a child's hair from their face. "Stories like yours remind us why we endure, why help each other," she said. "The blizzard may have tested us, but it also brought us together." The fire crackled, sending soft sparks into the golden light of the room, and the farmhouse seemed to hum with quiet life. Each shared story was a thread in the fragile tapestry of survival, weaving together hope, care, and the enduring human spirit against the frozen plains outside. As evening approached, the farmhouse settled into a gentle, steady rhythm. The children sank into sleep once more, the boy from the barn nestled by the fire, the youngest clutching their cloth doll. Clara moved softly among them, adjusting blankets, whispering gentle reassurances. The room filled with calm energy. Thomas and Elijah tended the fire, ensuring it burned steadily, letting warmth spread to every corner of the farmhouse. The rescued family sat by the hearth, their faces relaxing as he penetrated frozen limbs and the fears of the storm retreated. Each sip of broth, each carefully shifted blanket, brought them closer to a sense of normalcy. Outside, the snow lay thick and still, shimmering faintly in the fading light. The plains were silent, a vast frozen wilderness. Inside the farmhouse, life pulsed softly in the crackle of the fire, the rhythmic breathing of the children, and the quiet murmurs of the adults offering comfort and reassurance. Thomas leaned back in his chair, allowing himself a rare moment of reflection. The blizzard had left its mark, reshaping the world, testing endurance. Yet here, within these walls, warmth, hope, and care persisted. Each person present was a testament to survival, and to the fragile but enduring strength that had allowed them to face the frozen world outside. Clara joined him briefly, her hand brushing his arm. "We've done all I can for tonight," she whispered. "Now we rest together." The farmhouse seemed to sigh in quiet agreement, embracing them with warmth, guarding them against the cold, offering a rare, gentle peace in the aftermath of the storm. The night fully embraced the plains outside, the frozen world bathed in the pale silver glow of a weak moon. The wind whispered softly, like a humming beast, against the farmhouse walls, a reminder to those inside of the storm they had survived. Inside the house, warmth clung to every corner, the golden glow of the fire casting shimmering shadows that danced softly on the walls. The children slept peacefully, wrapped in thick blankets, their small breaths rising and falling in steady rhythms. The boy from the barn lay near the fire, finally at ease, the youngest clutching their cloth doll, a familiar object grounding them in the warmth of home. Thomas sat by the window, the lantern beside him, watching the silent snowfield. The plains were serene yet alien, transformed by the blizzard into a vast white wilderness. He breathed slowly, letting the peace of the night settle in his chest, easing the tension of the past days. Elijah, now fully recovered from the storm's chill, leaned back in his chair, sipping hot breath, listening to the soft crackle of the fire. The rescued family rested nearby, blankets wrapped tightly, their faces softening as warmth and security penetrated frozen limbs and anxious hearts. Clara moved softly among the sleepers, whispering words of comfort, brushing hair from faces, her movements slow and deliberate, creating a rhythm that blended with the silence of the night. The farmhouse hummed softly with life, a refuge against the cold outside. Every presence within was a quiet testament to endurance, human care, and the gentle power of warmth and hope that had seen them through the storm's fury. The first light of morning slowly crept over the snow-covered plains, casting soft pinks and silvers across the frozen landscape. The world outside was still and silent, the wind barely whispering against the farmhouse walls, the snow shimmering faintly in the gentle dawn. The farmhouse held its comforting warmth. The children stirred, blinking sleep from their eyes. Clara moved among them, brushing hair from their faces, ensuring each blanket was snug. The boy from the barn yawned widely, stretching, and the youngest clutched their cloth doll, still half-minus dreaming in the quiet comfort of home. Thomas stood at the window, the lantern in hand, tracing the outlines of snowdrifts and the blurred shape of buried fences. The fury of the storm had left its mark, reshaping the landscape into a frozen wilderness that seemed endless and serene. He took a deep breath, letting the calm of the morning show him, a rare moment of reflection. After days of relentless struggle, Elijah moved gently, tending the fire, helping the rescued neighbors regain warmth and strength. Every motion was deliberate, cautious, filled with quiet compassion, ensuring everyone in the farmhouse felt secure and supported. Farah approached Thomas, her hand brushing his arm. "A new day," she said softly. "We survived, and now we can face whatever comes next together." The farmhouse hummed with gentle life, soft breaths, quiet movements, the crackle of the fire blending with the stillness of the frozen plains outside. It was a refuge, a place of warmth, care, and hope, offering the promise that even after the harshest storms, life could continue, steady and enduring. The morning settled into a slow, deliberate rhythm as the inhabitants of the farmhouse prepared for the day ahead. The fire crackled steadily, spreading warmth to every corner, Clara moving softly among the children, helping them into layers of clothing, adjusting scarves and gloves against the lingering chill. Thomas and Elijah checked supplies, ensuring blankets, food, and warm clothing were ready for anyone they might encounter on the snow-covered plains. The rescued neighbors, now steadier, offered what help they could, gathering small items, assisting with repairs to the farmhouse door and windows. Outside, the snow shimmered softly in the gentle daylight, the wind barely stirring the surface. The drifts stretched endlessly, but the path they had cleared the day before provided guidance through the frozen landscape. Thomas mapped a route to nearby farms and cabins, noting areas that might still harbor trapped neighbors in need of warmth and care. Elijah looked back at the farmhouse, its golden glow a beacon of life in the vast white wilderness. "We go slowly," he said softly, "step by step, checking who we can reach. No hurry, no risk. Safety first." Thomas nodded. "Yes, today we restore connections. We bring warmth, food, and hope to those still trapped out there. The blizzard is over, but the world beyond these walls is still fragile." We moved together cautiously. The farmhouse hummed with quiet energy, life preserved and renewed, a refuge of warmth, care, and endurance in the storm's aftermath. Every motion, every careful preparation, was a step toward restoring order and humanity to a world reshaped by relentless snow. Bundled tight against the lingering cold, Thomas, Elijah, and the steadier neighbors stepped outside, leaving the comforting warmth of the farmhouse behind. The snow stretched endlessly, a soft, shimmering white plain in the pale morning light, the wind gentle yet persistent against their faces. Each step was deliberate, sinking deep into the soft drifts, requiring careful balance and steady energy. The path they had cleared provided guidance, but beyond it, the plains were unpredictable, the glittering surface hiding uneven ground. Thomas led the way, lantern in hand, scanning the horizon for any sign of life or tracks in the snow. Elijah followed closely, a watchful eye on the rescued neighbors, ensuring no one stumbled or overexerted themselves. The children were left behind for now, safe inside, their warmth and dress preserved. As the adults moved slowly across the vast frozen landscape, each measured step carrying hope and care. In the distance, Thomas spotted a blurred outline, a small figure, perhaps an other neighbor or traveler, hesitantly making their way through the snow. Relief and determination quietly surged within him. He murmured, "Someone needs help." We approached carefully. The world was quiet. Only the crunch of boots and the occasional distant call of a bird or animal. Each step toward the trapped figure was deliberate, gentle, filled with the quiet resolve to restore safety and warmth to the frozen plains. Though the memory of the storm lingered, human care extended outward, bridging the distance between isolation and refuge. As they drew closer, the figure resolved into an elderly man, bent, shivering, coat stiff with frost, breath forming small clouds in the cold morning air. He leaned heavily on a cane, moving slowly, clearly exhausted from walking through deep snow. His eyes widened as he saw Thomas, Elijah, and the others approaching, a glimmer of relief shining through the lines of his pale, weathered face. Thomas called out gently, "It's all right. We're here to help. You're safe now." The man's lips quivered, his voice hoarse from cold and exertion. "I thought I'd be trapped out there forever," he murmured, leaning heavily on the cane. That snow, it came so fast. Elijah moved to his side, offering a warm blanket and steady support. "One step at a time," he said softly. "We'll take you back to warmth and safety, and not alone anymore." Thomas and Elijah carefully guided him across the glittering plains, each step deliberate, mindful of deep drifts and hidden uneven ground. The light of the farmhouse grew steadily brighter ahead, a golden beacon promising shelter and comfort. The journey, though slow, was filled with quiet reassurance. Each cautious step reclaimed life from the frozen landscape, reminding all involved of the power of human resilience and the quiet triumph of hope over hardship. When they reached the farmhouse, the elderly man shivering lessened slightly, his pale cheeks slowly warming as the golden glow enveloped him. Inside, blankets were securely wrapped. Hot broth was offered. The fire crackled steadily. The farmhouse, already full of life and recovery, now held another story of survival. Proof that even in the harshest storms, care, patience, and endurance could bring people back from the frozen edge. Inside the farmhouse, the group settled into a calm rhythm. Each found warmth and comfort by the fire. The children slept peacefully under thick blankets, cocooned in the safety of home. The boy from the barn sat quietly, watching the newcomers with wide, curious eyes, while the youngest clutched their cloth doll, finding reassurance in the familiar presence. The elderly man, now wrapped in blankets, sipped hot broth slowly. Color returned to his cheeks, the trembling gradually easing. He looked around the small gathering in the glowing room, his eyes holding a mix of gratitude and quiet relief. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice soft but steady. "I thought I'd never see warmth again." Thomas and Elijah moved among the group, checking blankets, adjusting clothing, ensuring everyone was comfortable. Clara hovered gently nearby, brushing hair from faces, whispering words of comfort. The fire crackled steadily, spreading warmth through the room, casting a golden glow that enveloped every corner. Outside, the snow lay thick and still, shimmering faintly in the afternoon light. But inside, life pulsed softly. Each person's presence reinforced the fragile but enduring sense of hope, care, and survival. The farmhouse had become a sanctuary, a place where the storm's fury was kept at bay, where warmth, nourishment, and human connection offered refuge from the frozen world outside. In this quiet moment, each understood the truth of their survival. The blizzard had tested them, yet they had endured together. Step by step, cautiously, life had been reclaimed from the snow, and the farmhouse hummed softly with the ongoing rhythm of comfort. As the day faded into night, the farmhouse settled into a serene quiet. Its chafing slept deeply, cocooned in blankets that smelled faintly of hay and wood smoke. The boy from the barn slept gently by the fire, warmth easing the lingering chill in his bones. Thomas and Elijah sat quietly, sipping hot broth, reflecting on the day's careful steps across the frozen plains. Each person they had rescued, each path they had cleared, was a reminder of the resilience and quiet courage survival demanded. The snow shimmered in the dim light, the plains silent, save for the occasional distant call of a bird or the whisper of wind. Farah moved among the group, checking blankets, adjusting clothing, her soft words blending with the crackle of the fire. The rescued neighbors, now rested, shared quiet smiles, their gratitude unspoken, but evident in their relaxed features. The elderly man by the fire traced warmth into his hands, allowing himself a rare moment of peace. Thomas gazed out the window at the vast white expanse, letting the night's calm wash over him. The fury of the storm was past, leaving a frozen world, but also the tangible proof of endurance, care, and human connection. Each life preserved within the farmhouse was a testament to the quiet triumph of hope over hardship. The farmhouse hummed softly with life. Each breath, each movement, the crackle of the fire, blended into a lullaby of survival. Here, against the frozen plains, warmth, compassion, and resilience thrived, offering a gentle reminder that even after the harshest storms, life could continue steady and enduring. Night fully embraced the plains outside, the snow reflecting the moon's faint glow. The wind had died to a gentle sigh. The frozen world beyond the farmhouse walls quiet, serene, and still. Inside, warmth held firm, wrapping each inhabitant in a comforting embrace. The children slept peacefully, their small bodies curled under thick blankets. The boy from the barn shifted slightly by the fire, breathing evenly, the youngest clutching their cloth doll, reassured by its familiar presence. Farah moved softly among the sleepers, brushing hair from faces, whispering gentle words, blending with the crackle of the fire. Thomas and Elijah sat quietly, sipping hot broth, their attention alternating between the glow of the fire and the peaceful faces around them. Each rescued neighbor had settled into blankets, the tension and fear of the blizzard replaced by quiet security. The elderly man, snugly wrapped, allowed himself a small smile, feeling warmth penetrate frozen bones, bringing life back to his limbs. Farmhouse pulsed with gentle life, breaths rising and falling, soft whispers of reassurance, and the steady rhythm of the fire providing heat and hope. Outside, a snow shimmered under moonlight, untouched and silent, while inside, the refuge held firm against the cold, a haven of care, warmth, and endurance. Thomas allowed himself a moment to close his eyes, feeling the steady heartbeat of the house and the peace of the night, knowing that for now, everyone was safe, warm, and together. The farmhouse settled into a deep, soothing quiet. As the night deepened outside, the snow-covered plains shimmered faintly under a starry sky, the world frozen yet calm. The wind had died to a whisper, only occasionally rustling against the roof and the high drifts outside the windows. Inside, warmth enveloped every inhabitant. The glow of the fire spread comfort and safety throughout the rooms. The children slept deeply, their small bodies cocooned in blankets, breathing softly and evenly. The boy from the barn, curled by the hearth, exhaled slowly, the tension of recent days finally giving way to rest. The youngest clutched their cloth doll as half-minus closed, reassured by both its presence and the steady glow of the nearby fire. Thomas leaned back in his chair as half-minus closed. The lantern cast a soft halo around him. Elijah sat quietly beside him, sipping hot broth, listening to the gentle rhythm of breaths and the low crackle of the fire. Each rescued neighbor had found a place to rest, the fears and exhaustion of the storm slowly melting into a fragile calm. Farah moved among them like a quiet shadow, adjusting blankets, whispering gentle reassurances. The farmhouse itself seemed filled with comfort, every timber's creak, every flicker of flame, harmonizing with the steady pulse of life within. Outside, the plains were still and silent and vast, but inside, warmth, care, and hope thrived. The memory of the blizzard lingered only as a shadow, softened by the collective calm, the farmhouse's refuge promising that the night, though long and cold, could be faced together, strength restored and hearts at peace. Slowly, the first pale light crept over the horizon, casting a soft silver glow over the snow-covered plains. The world outside was still quiet, the wind a gentle murmur against the farmhouse walls, the snow shimmering faintly in the new dawn. Inside, the warmth of the fire and the farmhouse embraced each inhabitant. The children stirred, blinking sleep from their eyes, while Clara moved softly among them, helping with scarves and gloves, ensuring each blanket was snug. The boy from the barn stretched, yawned, the familiar glow of the fire comforting him as he prepared for the day ahead. Thomas stood at the window, the lantern in hand, surveying the transformed landscape. The blizzard had left the world frozen and white. Yet, in the stillness, there was a serenity, a quiet promise that life could continue, despite the memory of the storm. Elijah carefully checked supplies, ensuring blankets, food, and warm clothing were ready in case more survivors appeared. The rescued neighbors sat by the fire, sipping hot broth, sharing quiet smiles, feeling warmth seep into bones weary from days of struggle. Clara approached Thomas, her hand gently brushing his arm. "A new day," she whispered. "We survived, and we face whatever comes next together." Farmhouse pulsed with gentle life, soft breaths, the crackling fire, and the quiet rhythm of survival. Outside, the snow stretched endlessly, shimmering with the promise of the day, while inside hope, care, and endurance held firm, ready to meet any challenges that remained after the storm. After breakfast, Thomas, Elijah, and the stronger neighbors prepared to venture out once more, intent on checking surrounding farms and cabins for anyone who might still need help. The warmth of the fire lingered inside the farmhouse, but the call to aid others was strong, the snow-covered plains beckoning with both promise and caution. Bundled tight, they stepped into the crisp morning air. Each breath formed a small cloud that vanished quickly, the snow glistening in the soft daylight. The path they had cleared the previous days provided guidance, but the vast drift still demanded careful steps and constant attention. Thomas led the way, scanning for any footprints or signs of life. "They move slowly," he said softly. "The snow can hide dangers, but it can also reveal those who need help." Elijah followed closely, steady and watchful, offering encouragement and support. The rescued neighbors accompanied them, carrying blankets, food, and the quiet resolve to help anyone trapped in the storm's harsh aftermath. In the distance, a blur figure appeared, hackedly making its way through the drift. Relief quietly surged through Thomas and Elijah. "There," Thomas murmured. "There's someone else out here." We helped them carefully, step by step, cautiously. They moved across the shining plains, aware of the fragile balance between safety and danger, yet filled with the quiet determination to bring warmth, care, and hope to every life they could reach. As they approached, the blurred figure resolved into a young man, exhausted and shivering, his coat soaked with snow, face pale from cold. He leaned heavily on a walking stick, moving slowly, obviously struggling. Relief flickered in his eyes as he saw Thomas, Elijah, and the others approaching. "It's so cold," he whispered, his voice. "I thought no one would find me." Thomas gently stepped forward. "You're safe now," he said softly. "We're taking you back to warmth and rest. Just follow us slowly." Elijah handed over a thick blanket, carefully draping it over the young man's shoulders. Step by step, cautiously, they guided him across the glittering expanse, mindful of hidden drifts and uneven ground beneath the snow. Every motion was deliberate, every action filled with the quiet assurance of safety and care. The farmhouse ahead grew steadily brighter, its golden glow a beacon on the frozen plains. Each careful step toward home was a step away from the memory of the storm, a tangible movement of hope, connection, and human resilience. Inside, the young man collapsed into a chair by the fire. Blankets and hot broth were offered at once. Slowly, color returned to his cheeks. The shivering eased. The tension of the blizzard's memory began to fade. The farmhouse hummed with quiet life, a refuge of warmth, safety, and enduring compassion. As evening approached, the farmhouse settled into a calm, steady rhythm. The children slept deeply under thick blankets, their small bodies curled into the warmth of the fire. The boy from the barn lay peacefully nearby, the youngest clutching their cloth doll, comforted by the familiar presence. Thomas and Elijah moved gently among the group, checking blankets, adjusting clothing, offering hot broth to the rescued neighbors. The young man from the plains rested by the fire, his eyes softening as warmth seeped into his frozen limbs. The elderly man smiled faintly, finally at ease as the golden glow of the hearth filled the room. Clara murmured softly among the sleepers, brushing hair from faces, whispering gentle reassurances. The farmhouse hummed with quiet life, breaths, gentle movements, and the soft crackle of the fire, blending into a lullaby of endurance and survival. Outside, the snow stretched endlessly, shimmering in the pale moonlight, silent and serene. Inside, warmth, hope, and human connection thrived. Each life preserved, each soul rescued, and each cautious step taken across the frozen plains reinforced the fragile but enduring strength that had allowed them to face the frozen world together. Thomas allowed himself a moment of reflection, closing his eyes briefly. The fury of the blizzard was past, leaving a transformed landscape. Yet within these walls, life persisted, steady and calm, a testament to resilience, care, and the quiet power of warmth. Night fully settled over the snow-covered plains. The winds softened to a faint whisper. The world outside the farmhouse transformed into a vast, quiet, shimmering white. Inside, warmth and life clung to every corner. The glow of the fire spreading comfort and safety throughout the rooms. The children slept deeply, their small bodies cocooned in blankets, breathing slow and even. The boy from the barn nestled by the fire, the day's exhaustion giving way to peaceful rest. The youngest clutched their cloth doll, as half-minus closed, comforted by the familiar presence and the quiet rhythm of the room. Thomas sat by the window, the lantern casting a soft glow, his eyes tracing the frozen plains outside. Elijah, wrapped in a blanket, sipped slowly from a cup of hot broth, gentle warmth easing the tension left by days of struggle. The rescued neighbors, now secure, rested quietly, their faces softened by the firelight and the reassuring rhythm of the farmhouse. Clara moved softly among the sleepers, brushing hair from faces, whispering words of comfort. Every motion was deliberate, slow and calm, seamlessly blending with the crackle of the fire. The farmhouse itself seemed to hum with life, a refuge against the frozen night, a place where terror, warmth, and endurance held sway. Outside, the plains were silent, frozen, and serene. Inside, hearts beat quietly in unison with the gentle pulse of life, a testament to survival, compassion, and the enduring human spirit. Here in the gentle embrace of the night, all were safe, warm, and together. The night deepened, wrapping the farmhouse in a cocoon of soft shadows and the muted glow of firelight. Outside, the snow shimmered faintly in the pale moonlight, the frozen plains silent, except for the occasional whisper of wind across the drift. Inside, the warmth of the fire guarded each inhabitant in gentle security. The children slept peacefully, breath slowing to even, tucked beneath layers of blanket. The boy from the barn shifted slightly by the fire, his small form blending with the soft crackle of the hearth. The youngest clutched their cloth doll, reassured by its familiar presence. Thomas remained by the window, the lantern beside him, watching the vast white expanse. His eyes traced the patterns of snow, buried fences, ice-leading retops, the frozen world serene, yet transformed. Elijah sat quietly beside him, sipping from a warm cup, feeling the lingering chill ease from his bones. Clara moved softly among the sleepers, adjusting blankets, whispering gentle reassurance. The rescued neighbors rested nearby, now fully recovered from the blizzard's immediate effects, their faces softened by warmth and comfort. The farmhouse quietly hummed with life. Each breath, each movement, the flicker of flame, blended into a lullaby of endurance, care, and survival. Outside, the frozen plains stretched endlessly, silent and still. But here, within these walls, hope, warmth, and human connection had triumphed over the storm's relentless fury. The first gentle light of morning spilled over the snow-covered plains, casting a soft glow that faintly reflected on the frosted windows. The frozen world outside seemed peaceful, the wind almost absent, the snow glittering like scattered diamonds in the quiet dawn. Inside the farmhouse, warmth lingered in every corner. The children stirred slowly, blinking sleep from their eyes, while Clara moved among them, brushing hair from faces, adjusting blankets. The boy from the barn stretched, yawned, his small body finally fully relaxed after days of tension and cold. The youngest clutched the cloth doll, eyes bright with the gentle comfort of safety and home. Thomas and Elijah prepared for the day, checking supplies, carefully planning for any neighbors who might still need help. The rescued adults gathered by the fire, sipping hot broth, exchanging quiet smiles, allowing themselves to feel the security and calm that had finally returned. The farmhouse pulsed with life. Soft breaths, Gentle movements, the crackle of the fire, blended into a quiet, reassuring rhythm. The fury of the storm had left its mark. Yet here, there was warmth, care, and yet resilience had endured. Thomas looked out at the shimmering plains, a quiet hope filling him. The blizzard had tested them all. But life continued, steady, calm, and enduring. They had survived together, and together they would face whatever came next, strengthened by warmth, care, and the quiet triumph of survival. The farmhouse hummed softly with life, the survivors settling into a calm, comforting rhythm. Outside, the snow-covered plains shimmered in the morning light, silent and serene, a reminder of the storm they had endured and the world they had reclaimed inside. Warmth, care, and quiet human connection prevailed. The children slept peacefully, the rescued neighbors rested, and Thomas, Elijah, and Clara allowed themselves a rare moment of reflection, gratitude for survival, resilience, and the simple comfort of being together. As you listen, let the calm of the farmhouse and the gentle rhythm of life after the storm guide you toward rest. Feel the warmth surrounding you, the steady pulse of survival and care, allowing your own thoughts to settle gently like snow on the plains. Thank you for joining the story of endurance, hope, and quiet triumph. If you enjoyed this journey through the 1911 Nebraska Blizzard, please like, subscribe, and share in the comments where you're watching from, whether in the US, Europe, Canada, or elsewhere, and when you enjoy stories. Now, close your eyes, breathe slowly, and let the gentle calm of the farmhouse lull you into peaceful rest. The storm has passed, and warmth, hope, and safety remain.